For half a century, the Edmund Fitzgerald has been called a mystery, a legend, and even a curse. During her era, she was hailed as the pride of the American side, a freighter so vast that people believed she could never be broken. On a brutal November night in 1975, she vanished without a single distress call. 29 men were lost. No warning, no survivors, only silence. So how does a ship this size disappear without a trace? Now, nearly 50 years later, a team armed with state-of-the-art underwater drones descended into the black water to her grave. And what the drones revealed in the darkness changed everything we thought we knew about the night she died. She was a marvel. At 729 feet long, she dwarfed every other freighter on the Great Lakes. Newspapers hailed her as the Queen of the Lakes. Sailors gave her a prouder name, the pride of the American side. Her hull, painted a deep crimson red, cut through the water like a blade. Her white superstructure gleamed against the horizon. She was so striking that people lined the bridges just to watch her glide beneath. Cameras flashing, children pointing as her horn echoed across the shore. She wasn't just a freighter hauling ore. She was a celebrity. Her purpose was simple. Move 26,000 tons of tectonite iron ore from the mines of Duluth, Minnesota, to the steel mills of Detroit and Toledo. But she did it with grace and speed that stirred pride everywhere she went. The men aboard loved her. Many stayed for years loyal to her decks. And at her helm, in her final years, stood Captain Ernest McSorley, a man known for his steady hand and calm voice. One of the most trusted captains on the lakes. For 17 years, the Fitzgerald lived up to her reputation. More than 700 voyages. No serious mishaps. No crew lost. To many, she seemed untouchable. Some even whispered the word that history punishes most. Unsinkable. But history is cruel to ships called unsinkable. On November 9, 1975, the Fitzgerald left Superior, Wisconsin, bound for Detroit with her usual cargo. Not far behind her steamed another freighter. The Arthur M. Anderson. At first, it seemed like another routine crossing. But the weather turned. By the next morning, the lake was a monster. Winds tore across the Superior at over 70 miles per hour. Waves taller than houses slammed the decks like falling buildings. Ice gripped every railing. Visibility was reduced to nothing. At 3:30 in the afternoon, McSorley's calm voice came across the radio to the Anderson. "We have a bad list. Lost event. One of the hatch covers is giving us trouble." Hours later, at 7:10 p.m., he sent his last message. "We are holding our own." And then, silence. Within minutes, the Edmund Fitzgerald vanished from radar. In the west, no flares, not a single desperate cry for help. When searchers found her days later, she was split in two. The bow, upright in the mud, frozen like a tombstone. The stern, twisted and upside down, scattered like a broken toy. Not one of the 29 men aboard were ever recovered. For their families, silence was the cruelest answer of all. The official investigation offered little comfort. In 1977, the Coast Guard concluded that water had entered through damaged or unsecured hatch covers. But that explanation carried an unspoken accusation that the crew had been careless. Families rejected it outright. Captain McSorley was too disciplined, his men too seasoned, for such a simple failure. The National Transportation Safety Board saw it differently. Their theory? Structural failure. They said that the Fitzgerald may have simply snapped in two on the surface, torn apart by stress, before she ever slipped beneath the waves. Others whispered of hidden dangers. Perhaps she struck an uncharted shoal, ripped open in the blinding snow, where maps were silent. Or perhaps she was swallowed by rogue waves, walls of water 35 feet high, striking in a sudden, merciless succession. Each theory carried its own logic. Each had its believers, but none could be proven. And so, the Fitzgerald slipped from fact into legend. Theories piled up, songs were written, myths grew darker with every passing year. In 2025, when the drone slipped beneath the calm surface, the chatter on the ship above went quiet. The water closed over like a curtain, and the silence that followed seemed unnatural. Heavy, almost alive. On the monitors, the first images appeared. Drifting sediment, tiny white flecks suspended in the dark, and the faint shadows of fish slipping past. Minutes stretched, and then, something vast emerged from the gloom. The bow of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It rose like a monument from another age. Looming, rusted, and immense. The ROF's light swept across the corroded steel plates, her hull buried deep in the lakebed silt. She looked less like a wreck, and more like a cathedral, frozen in time, and her silence was as loud as the storm that sank her. The ROF traced along the starboard side. Every rivet, every wrinkle of warped steel, was captured in detail, sharper than anyone had seen. Fish darted nervously through the beams of light, disappearing back into the blackness, as if even they knew this was hallowed ground. For a moment, the scene seemed almost peaceful. The great ship resting quietly after decades in the dark. On the surface vessel, one of the engineers leaned closer to her screen, eyes narrowing. The pilot complied, pulling the ROV into position. The floodlight steadied, and there it was. A clam. Gone. Not rusted away, not buried, missing. Another was bent backwards at a grotesque angle, like a finger snapped in half. Others were twisted and deformed, their purpose long since defeated. These weren't tribal fittings. These were the locks that sealed the ship's cargo hatches. Each of the Fitzgerald's 21 hatches had 22 clams, more than 460 in total. Together, they formed the barrier between the freezing waters of Lake Superior and 26,000 tons of iron ore below. They were the line between survival and death. And yet here, right before their eyes, dozens were gone or broken. Then came the discovery that froze the room. A vent pipe, torn away completely, sheared off at its base. In its place yawned a jagged 4-inch hole. A direct passage into the ship's cargo hold. A funnel for the storm. Suddenly, the old Coast Guard transcription sounded different. Captain McSorley's calm report, "We have a bad list. Lost event. One of the hatch covers is giving us trouble," sounded completely differently. For nearly 50 years, these words sounded almost routine. Manageable. But here, with a hole glaring on the screen, it was obvious. It wasn't manageable. It was catastrophic. The Fitzgerald had been flooding unseen. So, what did the data reveal? The data gathered from the dive allowed researchers to run new simulations. What they discovered was horrifying. With waves smashing over the bow, water could have been entering the Fitzgerald at a rate of 4,000 gallons per minute. That's the volume of a full swimming pool every few minutes, pouring directly into her forward holds. And yet, on the bridge, the crew may have had no idea. The ship was still moving. The engine still thundered. To the men steering her through the storm, it felt like they were surviving. McSorley's last transmission, "We are holding our own," wasn't false bravado, it was the truth as far as they knew. But the reality below deck was different. The bow, heavy with water, dipped lower and lower. Each fresh wave crashed harder, forcing in more water. The storm was not simply beating the Fitzgerald, it was filling her, wave by wave, in silence. And then came the final moment. The bow, weighted beyond recovery, plunged beneath the surface. The stern, still buoyant, heaved upwards. The ship's spine buckled under the impossible strain, and in seconds, the Edmund Fitzgerald tore in two. That's why there was no mayday, no flares, no cry for help. The end came too fast. One moment, she was there. The next, she was gone. To most people, a broken clamp or a missing vent sounds like a minor defect, an issue for the maintenance logs. But to a shipbuilder, naval engineer, and marine, it is nothing less than life and death. Her survival depended entirely on hundreds of steel clamps working perfectly, and all it took was a handful to fail in the wrong place, under the wrong storm, and she was doomed. What the drone showed was not just isolated failure. It revealed a pattern. clamps missing across multiple hatches, steel bent and warped, evidence of years of stress and retrofitted repairs. This wasn't the sudden collapse of an indestructible ship. This was a vessel with hidden wounds pushed past its breaking point. The realization chilled experts. The Fitzgerald wasn't unlucky. She wasn't cursed. She was vulnerable, fragile, and sailing into one of the worst storms Lake Superior has ever unleashed. If the story unsettled you as much as it did us, make sure you subscribe and like this video. There are many more mysteries waiting beneath the surface, and you won't want to miss the next one.